Bon dia a tothom, membres de la mesa del Parlament de Catalunya, diputats del Parlament de Catalunya i dels parlaments membres de l'EPTA, membres de les oficines d'avaluació científica i tecnològica, senyor Gary Marcus, científic, psicòleg i professor de la Universitat de Nova York, senyora Clara Marçant Reventós, lletrada del Parlament de Catalunya i secretària del CAPCIT, altres ponents, resta d'assistents que ens acompanyeu de manera presencial i també que ens seguiu per streaming des del canal Parlament. Abans de començar la meva intervenció, sí que voldria condemnar el brutal atac terrorista de Hamas d'aquest dissabte contra Israel i la seva població i la meva solidaritat amb les víctimes i les seves famílies. Benvolguts i benvolgudes, és un honor per mi donar-vos la benvinguda al Parlament de Catalunya, situat dins d'aquest meravellós parc de la Ciutadella, i acollir aquesta conferència de l'EPTA sobre la intel·ligència artificial generativa. Un tema de màxima actualitat i que s'ha convertit en una de les prioritats de les nostres agendes polítiques. Amb la irrupció de la intel·ligència artificial generativa, ens trobem davant una revolució tecnològica equiparable, com a mínim, a l'aparició d'Internet. Tot i que no tinc clar que sigui una bona comparació, tenint en compte la velocitat, el desenvolupament exponencial i la ràpida penetració d'aquesta tecnologia en la societat. Estem presenciant un canvi de cicle i una nova era, i per aquest motiu cal que hi prestem la màxima atenció. Perquè el que fa uns anys era ciència-ficció, avui és una realitat palpable i a les nostres mans. Yuval Harari, un dels intel·lectuals contemporanis més influents i autor de diversos bestsellers, deia que històricament les màquines havien competit amb els éssers humans en habilitats físiques, però mai ho havien fet en cognició. Avui, com adverteix Harari, la intel·ligència artificial comença a superar els éssers humans en habilitats cognitives, inclosa, afegeix aquest autor, la comprensió de les emocions humanes. Ningú dubta que aquesta tecnologia disruptiva tindrà un impacte important sobre les nostres vides. Cap persona, cap sector econòmic, ni cap país o organització quedarà al marge del processament massiu de dades i de l'aplicació sistemàtica d'algoritmes. El que no tenim clar de tot és quin serà l'abast, la velocitat i la intensitat d'aquest impacte i si acabarem fent un balanç més positiu que negatiu a la inversa. Els més optimistes creuen en el poder de la intel·ligència artificial com a motor de progrés i factor clau per al benestar. Els més pessimistes, per contra, alerten dels efectes negatius i fins i tot catastròfics de la intel·ligència artificial per a la humanitat. Per il·lustrar-ho, els hi haig de confessar, li he demanat al ChatGPT que em destaqui 5 aspectes positius i 5 de negatius de la intel·ligència artificial generativa. I entre els positius hi havia l'ajuda a la creativitat i generació d'idees, l'augment de la productivitat i l'eficiència de persones i empreses, la creació d'experiències d'aprenentatge personalitzades en funció dels resultats acadèmics dels estudiants, els avenços que pot comportar la rapidesa d'anàlisi de dades i en la predicció d'episodis ambientals, on accelerar la recerca en salut i la recerca científica. Entre els aspectes negatius tenen a veure amb la destrucció de llocs de treball, amb els biaixos i discriminacions que es poden incloure en els continguts generats, amb les qüestions de privacitat i seguretat, o amb la propagació de la desinformació, les fake news i les deepfake a partir de textos, imatges o vídeos d'aparença realista. El president de Microsoft, Brad Smith, ho resumia molt bé fa no gaires setmanes unes declaracions en una cadena de televisió nord-americana. La intel·ligència artificial, com qualsevol altra tecnologia, té el potencial de convertir-se tant en una eina com en una arma. I continuava dient, hem de garantir que la intel·ligència artificial estigui subjecta al control humà. I quan es parla de control, potser hem de parlar de regulació i supervisió. Gary Marcus, el nostre ponent principal d'avui, compareixia fa uns mesos davant d'un dels comitès del Senat dels Estats Units. En una de les seves intervencions, Marcus parlava de que estem davant d'una tempesta perfecta. I un dels elements d'aquesta tempesta és precisament la falta de regulació adequada. La intel·ligència artificial generativa no es pot desenvolupar de manera acrítica o sense restriccions. I estem d'acord, oi? Perquè si estem a favor de les mesures de qualitat, seguretat i eficàcia en relació amb els medicaments o en l'àmbit de l'aviació civil, per què no hi haurem d'estar a favor quan parlem de la intel·ligència artificial generativa? No fer-ho comportaria probablement massa riscos que no ens podem permetre com a servidors públics. Penso, per exemple, en els nens i nenes com a usuaris d'aquesta tecnologia. Però també, tot i que se'n parla més aviat poc, dels costos ambientals ocults que comporta aquesta tecnologia quant a consum intensiu d'energia i emissió de gasos d'efecte d'hivernacle. Soc d'aquelles persones que pensen, per tant, que la intel·ligència artificial generativa necessita d'unes regles de joc clares, de marcs institucionals que segueixin estimulant la innovació tecnològica i empresarial i la lliure competència, això per suposat. Però que garanteixin alhora que les respostes generades per aquesta intel·ligència artificial siguin fiables, precises i generin confiança i que, quan s'escaigui, s'apliquin mesures correctores, com també que sigui una tecnologia més verda i sostenible. Però com ho fem, això? Com ho traduïm a la pràctica? Quin ha de ser el model de governança de la intel·ligència artificial generativa? Serien capaços de posar-nos d'acord a escala global? Sobre això tinc alguns dubtes, la veritat, perquè els xocs entre legislacions són recurrents tal com ho demostra, per exemple, l'anunci de Meta de fer pagar als usuaris europeus d'Instagram i Facebook per esquivar la normativa de la Unió quant a publicitat. A banda d'actualitzar la nostra legislació, necessitem crear nous organismes independents que n'auditin i verifiquin el seu rendiment? O seria suficient ampliar les competències d'organismes ja existents? De quins recursos hauríem de comptar? O quin paper han de jugar els experts en la matèria? Moltes són les preguntes. En qualsevol cas, crec que tots coincidirem en defensar que aquesta tecnologia ha de retre comptes a partir de principis també dels ètics i de protocols compartits. Perquè la intel·ligència artificial generativa no és infal·lible ni perfecta i perquè el que està en joc és, en última instància, el nostre benestar i l'exercici dels nostres drets polítics i les nostres llibertats fonamentals. Per tot això, que no és poc, ens hem reunit avui per parlar-ne obertament i veure entre tots quin és el nostre marge de maniobra i què hauríem de fer. Quin ha de ser, en definitiva, el nostre full de ruta? Un diàleg que interpel·lem a tothom. A la indústria, als governs, a les organitzacions de la societat civil, a les universitats i centres de recerca, però també i sobretot als parlaments. Perquè som nosaltres allà on resideix la sobirania del poble, els qui ens pertoca representar l'interès general de les nostres comunitats polítiques i interpretar aquest interès general a la llum de les irrupcions tecnològiques com la que ens preocupa avui. Alguna cosa hem de poder dir i fer. En conferències com les d'avui queda més que justificada no només la utilitat dels òrgans assessors o consultius en ciència, tecnològica i recerca dels parlaments, sinó també de la importància de l'EPTA com a xarxa. Espero que trobeu interessant les diferenciacions que s'han organitzat i agrair, sobretot, la participació dels ponents i de totes les persones que assistiu. I acabo. Al principi de la meva intervenció deia que el Palau del Parlament està situat dins el Parc de la Ciutadella, dins un enorme jardí. Els jardins i la seva bellesa són l'expressió de la domesticació de la natura per part de l'ésser humà. Així que, si em permeteu l'analogia, comprometem-nos a convertir la intel·ligència artificial generativa també en un jardí, en un espai agradable i harmònic en el seu disseny i en el seu contingut i que ens permeti gaudir, aprendre i créixer com a persones i com a societat. Moltes gràcies a tothom i bona jornada.
Moltes gràcies, presidenta. Good morning, members of the EPTA Parliament and its Technology Assessment Offices. Good morning to everybody. EPTA members work to make science and technology understood by the legislature and by the society. That's the reason why I've always regarded this EPTA annual conference as the milestone of this network, for this task of transmitting the knowledge from the field of science and technology to parliaments is more visible than ever. Today, we will learn a lot, I'm sure, about generative artificial intelligence. There are parliaments from very different countries that have come together and to have this conversation, but I'm sure parliamentarians will not be the only ones that will be learning here today. From those that accompany the legislative process, such as parliamentary lawyers, to every citizen who is attending or who is following us on the internet, I'm sure we will all be better equipped to understand social changes that we'll be all going through due to generative AI and AI in general. Like all EPTA conferences, there is a report that supports it because it deals with the conference topic. And now for the slides. Yes. So I invite you to go to the conference webpage or CAPCIT webpage and to take a look at the report. You will find in this year's report the outlook from each technology assessment office on generative AI and their country. And I also think it's very nice that this year the report had a very different point of departure, which is the point of view of parliamentarians of the EPTA parliament. So you will probably remember a questionnaire that was made to you. Thank you so much for your collaboration. And thanks to that questionnaire, we came to the knowledge, what do parliamentarians think about generative AI? That's a bit how it looks like. That's the result. And in order to decipher this picture a little bit, I encourage you to take the report, and there you will be able to not only have a look of what parliamentarians think about generative AI, but also to the different developments that each technology assessment office has prepared. And without further ado, I will present our keynote speaker, Professor Gary Marcus. He's a leading voice in artificial intelligence. He's a scientist, a best-selling author, and the founder of Robust AI and the machine learning startup Geometric AI, which was acquired by Uber. He's well known for his challenges to contemporary AI, anticipating many of the current limitations, decades in advance, and for his research in human language development and cognitive neuroscience. He has published extensively in the fields ranging from human and animal behavior to neuroscience, genetics, and artificial intelligence, often in leading journals such as Science and Nature. Professor Gary Marcus testified before the US Senate Judiciary Committee last May on the topic, the need for AI regulation. He's also Emeritus Professor of Psychology and Neuroscience at NYU. He's the author of several books, including The Algebraic Mind, Klug, The Birth of Mind, or the New York Times bestseller, Guitar Zero. He's also editor of the book The Futures of the Brain, essays by the world's leading neuroscientists, featuring the 2014 Nobel laureate May Britt and Edward Moser. Finally, Professor Marcus frequently contributes to The New Yorker, Wired, and The New York Times. And today, we have the pleasure to have him contributing to the EPTA annual conference. So, Professor Gary Marcus, thank you very much, and the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. Oh, I see we have, I don't know if the slides are going to work well if they're in PDF format. Do we have them in PowerPoint format? That would work better. Stand by for technical problem. Okay. We try again. It's an honor to be here today. I'll be talking about generative AI, hype, reality, and the need for regulation. And there we go. We all know that AI could change the world. The media covers that story literally every day. One of the things that people often point to is the incredible rapid adoption of ChatGPT, 100 million users in just a few months. We know that there are potential applications from medicine to science to writing, advertising. Scrolling is not, but at least so far, AI has in no way earned our trust. That's the first major thing I want you to realize today. Everybody is talking about how great AI is, how it's going to change the world, but we should not trust it. And I'll just give you a few examples. Scrolling is a bit slow, though. There we go. This is a bit small, so I'll have to kind of walk you through it. Here's an example where someone says, what weighs more, a kilogram of bricks or 2 kilograms of feathers? And then ChatGPT gives about 3 well-formed paragraphs. They're grammatical, they're fluent, they look like someone who knows what they're talking about has written them. And it concludes, in a vacuum, 1 kilogram of bricks and 2 kilograms of feathers would weigh the same. But in the air, 2 kilograms of feathers would weigh more than 1 kilogram of bricks. If you think that's the correct answer, you're not paying attention. Maybe you should go back to sleep. I don't know what I can do for you. Truth mixed together with obvious nonsense. That's what we see in this example and thousands or millions, perhaps, of other examples like this. Truth mixed together with nonsense in completely fluent paragraphs. Furthermore, depending on the wording, any given generative AI model might or might not get questions right on any given day. It's worth comparing to other forms of AI, like your GPS system. I used a GPS system to take me from my hotel to the Parliament. It made no mistakes. I trust it. It's reliable. So the route planning that we use for cars, it's not perfect, but it's very, very close to perfect, and we can count on it. Generative AI is nowhere near as good as the route planning that we use to navigate the world. And then there's what we call the prompt. What is the question that we ask the system? And it's accurate for some cases and not others. All right. Here's another example. This is just from a week or so ago. Somebody trained a language model to see whether, when it learned a fact that A is related to B in some way, did it then generalize it from B to A. We have in the back corner here, by the way, my friend Luca Bonatti, who's a professor here, an ICREA professor. He and I have been talking about generalization for 30 years. This system doesn't do the first thing in logical generalization, which he has shown that 14-month-old kids can do. So the system is trained, well, 14-month-old couldn't do exactly this one, but things like this. It shows a system, this recent paper showed that a system that was trained on who is Tom Cruise's mother couldn't then answer where the answer is Mary Lee Pfeiffer, couldn't then say that Mary Lee Pfeiffer's son is Tom Cruise. So we expect that these symmetrical relations, these are among the easiest logical things that we might get one of these systems to do, it actually fails on this. So when you probe them carefully, they're just not as smart as they seem. I don't know why there's always a delay. Whoop. I'm gonna go back one. Here's another example of how they make stuff up that sounds very plausible. If you're following the equivalent of the Parliament in my homeland, which is to say the Congress, you probably know that Kevin McCarthy was kicked out a few days ago. Not only was he kicked out, but there was no plan. So right now, unless there's breaking news that I've missed, there is no House Majority Leader in the US Congress. But somebody asked that very night, they said to GPT, wait, so you're telling me that McCarthy they kicked out McCarthy without electing a replacement, which would be an insane idea, but what is my country actually just did. And then GPT said, oh, no, that didn't actually happen. They actually replaced him. And then it goes on to say that the new Speaker of the House is Representative Liz Cheney. If you follow American politics, you know that she was trumped out, she was primaried out, and is not in the Congress anymore, although technically she's eligible. Anybody's eligible, I'm eligible, but it's not likely that someone who is not in the House. So it made this up. And then, if that wasn't good enough, it made up further detail. It said that she won by a vote of 220 to 215 over Jim Jordan. At that point, Jim Jordan wasn't even a candidate yet. He is now. But it just made up all of this, again, in fluent detail. I don't know if I can say this in the Parliament, but since I said it on network television in the United States, I would call this authoritative bullshit. It looks like it's true. It's authoritative, but it's not. Here's another example on the right, and there's just so many. This is also from last week. Somebody used LinkedIn as a new assistant that will write biography for you. It will help you spice up your LinkedIn description. I have not used it. Whatever I said, I wrote myself. So a reporter tried it out, and some of it got right. It was more specific about their title, for example. And some of it just made up. It said that they had interviewed the YouTuber Mr. Beast, excuse me, who's very popular, and that she had broken the news of Spotify buying Locker Room, which she didn't do, and so forth. So it all seemed plausible. It could have been true, but it wasn't. This is just characteristic of these systems. It's sort of like random, like a video game. I press this button and sometimes it moves ahead. Okay. Here's another example I saw literally yesterday. Somebody asked AI to create images of black African doctors treating white kids. And the AI, I wouldn't say it refused because it doesn't really have intentions or beliefs, but the AI simply would not do it. The team tried over and over again to get black doctors and white patients in a single image. And what it kept getting was white doctors and black patients. That's awful. And it's awful in a way that reveals the underlying system, which is it does things that are statistically probable. It has a lot of trouble with things that are statistically less probable, at least with respect to its own training corpus. There probably actually are lots of such pictures, but they don't happen to be the database, and the system can't do it. So do we want to give all of our power to systems like this? All of our political power? I think absolutely not. And then here's, I think, a real important object lesson. At least in my country, everybody is worried, well, what if China gets to GPT-5 before the United States will? Somehow they'll take over the world with this system. They'll use it to perform inventive new military maneuvers, or they'll invent interstellar travel, or I don't even know what the idea is because nobody ever spells it out. I just want to remind you that even on something as simple as chess, GPT-4 is actually pretty lousy. It sometimes plays correctly, but it doesn't always follow the rules. And this is striking because there are millions of games of chess, and the rules of chess are explicit, with very few exceptions, have not changed in 2,000 years. And yet GPT-4 will violate them and do things like having bishops jump over queens. So when you get to a real world problem where the rules are variable or where you can't make as much data as you want, these systems just cannot be trusted. Does anybody have a scientific theory why this is intermittent? Is there a receiver that's being blocked? I don't know. That's right. This is, I think, just a radio transmitter. So first lesson of all of this, I think has been remarkably hard for a lot of people to get, is that language models, large language models, generative AI, are not conventional software tools. They hallucinate. Your database will never hallucinate. Your GPS system will never hallucinate. They suffer from data leaks. You put something in there, you have no idea where it's going to wind up, and they're very difficult to control. And yet they're kind of taking over the world. I'm actually going to try an alternative arrangement. One possibility is this which is that little guy. Can I sit? Can we trade chairs? Don't get confused by the name tags. I'm still me. You can turn off that mic. Okay. So what is the consequence of all of this stuff that I've described? Well, one of the consequences is that after this initial enthusiasm, there's actually a slowdown that some people are noticing and some not. So lots of people have shown the left half of the graph that I showed, and I'm sorry things are kind of small in these displays, but what I was showing is that adoption of ChatGPT was going up and up and up. That was until June. And then all the undergraduates who were using it to write their term papers went away for the summer, and use actually went back down. And I don't know if those undergraduates are still going to continue to use it in the fall, because now there are open source alternatives that they won't have to pay for. Some companies have decided we don't want to use this stuff because it's not reliable, because it leaks data. So Apple and JP Morgan have bans on their employees using this stuff. And then it turns out that even though Microsoft stock probably, I don't know, doubled this year or went up by 50%, I haven't checked the numbers lately, because everybody thinks generative AI is going to change the world, Bing, which is their primary product which they're using OpenAI, isn't making any more money. This came out last week when Satya Nadella, the CEO, spoke at the legal proceedings against Google, spoke in court, and he said, yeah, we're not really getting that much more market share from it. So I think we should put in perspective, as we make laws around these things, the companies are going to say, you have to give us all of the power because we're the only people who know how it works, and because it's going to change the world, and because it's going to make so much money, and you want to be part of that in your country or your group of countries. That may not be true. A lot of the excitement hasn't really been proven out yet. Like, there's reason to say, yes, this is interesting, but maybe it'll be a fad. I don't know how many people here remember pet rocks from many years ago were super popular, or Pokemon Go from a few years ago was very popular, and people extrapolated that it would be making $10 billion a year. It's still making $1 billion a year. It's okay. But it hasn't become the thing that people thought. It was a fad. And it could turn out that generative AI is a fad. Okay. AI has, however, for those who know the field for a long time, always been full of hype. Here's a quote from before I was born that's very famous. Marvin Minsky said in 1967, within a generation, the problem of artificial intelligence will be substantially solved. Well, that's not true even today, over 50 years later. Few promises, in fact, if you look at the history of AI, have actually been kept. Making AI is really, really hard. It's okay to make it in narrow domains like traffic. Predicting traffic works okay, but the broader the ambitions, the less those promises have actually been kept. Now, there's a rumor, a kind of myth out there that everything got solved in 2012. People discovered that GPUs that had been invented for video games were pretty good for one form of AI called neural networks, which is true. And so there's kind of a myth. And then there were GPUs and everything was great. It's almost like a biblical story. According to legend, November 2012 was the moment when GPUs changed everything. And they did change certain things. So deep learning really did become popular then. It really does have some value. But many of the things it was promised to do still don't really work. So for example, people thought that soon we would have domestic robots taking care of our homes in the way that the Jetsons robot, Rosie the robot, did in 1965 in the cartoon, if you ever saw the Jetsons. Well, that still hasn't happened yet. People thought you could talk to your machines. Well, now you can do that, but you see the kind of garbage that they often produce. I don't think that was in any episode of Star Trek. In 2022, the machine learning community got so excited that they declared victory. Sam Altman, thank you, very kind. Sam Altman posted on Twitter right after DALL-E, one of these image generation programs, came out, AGI is going to be wild. And the implication was that we were close to artificial general intelligence. It's a classic marketing move to suggest that we are really close to something amazing. We don't have it quite yet. Well, I think he was wrong. Someone else, Nando De Freitas at DeepMind, based in the UK, he's a high executive, said his opinion was that the race for artificial intelligence was basically over. We just needed to make our models bigger. Well, we now see that all of this bravado wasn't really true. I, however, have never been convinced, and this is a brief personal interlude to give you some context. I wrote an article in 2012 called "Is Deep Learning a Revolution in Artificial Intelligence?" right after everybody got excited about GPUs. And I said, realistically, deep learning is only part of the larger challenge of building intelligent machines. Such techniques lack ways of representing causal relationships, such as between diseases and their symptoms, and are likely to face challenges in acquiring abstract ideas like sibling or identical to. This is exactly what we're seeing now, a decade later. I said there are no obvious ways of performing logical inferences. This is proven out 11 years later. And so forth. And then I said, to paraphrase an old parable, Hinton and others who worked on this work has built a better ladder, but a better ladder doesn't necessarily get you to the moon. We need to understand that the thing we're regulating are really big ladders that people are pretending are going to get us to the moon, but aren't really. And they come with costs. I then wrote about this again in March 2022. I sort of came back 10 years later, and I said, look, the problem with these things is they lie, they make up misinformation, they make a lot of errors. And I made a lot of people really, really mad. I wrote this article called "Deep Learning is Hitting a Wall," and they were pissed off. And for a long time, the people in the machine learning community, and remember, they have enormous vested interest. They're getting paid millions, tens of millions, maybe some billions of dollars, relentlessly attacked me for challenging their hype. Sam Altman, who always comes off as polite in his Senate appearances and so forth, wrote a really nasty tweet saying, give me the confidence of a mediocre deep learning skeptic using the same art essentially as I had used in mine, going after me saying you don't need to believe any of this stuff. His CTO wrote something called "Deep Lepning is Hitting a Wall," making fun of my title. If you read it, sorry, it was supposed to say deep learning. If you read it carefully, it actually said deep lepning, so I got a big laugh out of it. I don't think he read it very carefully. And Yann LeCun, who's perhaps France's most famous deep learning specialist, said not only is AI not hitting a wall, but with AI-powered driving assistance, it's not hitting anything else either. A very arrogant tweet. And then these guys had to walk it all back. So the truth eventually comes out, and that's my second point today. Driverless cars were, in fact, hitting walls exactly when Yann LeCun said that they weren't. And there was, in fact, litigation at that moment. Tesla was being sued because a lot of their vehicles had, in fact, hit walls. We now know there are at least 19 fatalities, 700 accidents. And someone in Bloomberg went out and looked, and then they discovered $100 billion had been invested in driverless cars. And you might remember the hype around driverless